Well, just got back from school picture day, and it turns out there's a case of the horsey hives going around. Luckily, I've already had the horsey hives when I was a foal, as well as the pony pox, so I'm pretty much built up in immunity by now. Unfortunately for all of those foals, it's gonna be a couple of days in the hospital. I would have rescheduled, but considering the hospital recovery time, it just would have pushed Miss Cheerily off her schedule and would have never worked out. Besides, I get paid for the day whether the photo session is successful or not, so we're kind of stuck with the photo that we got. But in other news, Princess Twilight is being visited by Princess Cadence, her brother Shining Armor, and her niece Princess Flurry Heart. So it's an exciting day for them. Sure, Princess Twilight may have had obligations to visit the foals at the hospital and read them a story and bring them toys and all this other good stuff. Excellent PR move, by the way. But, of course, she also has plenty of time in her life for her favorite niece, and doesn't mind doing a little babysitting. Of course, Spite protested a lot, but Twilight was more than happy to take Flurry Heart with her and do some babysitting while her brother and Princess Cadence got away and spent a day at the museum taking in an art exhibit posted by a former member of the Royal Guard. Sure, it's nice to get to know the Royal Guards a little bit better and know that at least one of them has hobbies and interests outside of just being the Royal Guard. Although he's definitely not the type of typical color scheme that you typically think of when you think of Royal Guards. But I guess it's not that far off what we've seen in certain other ponies. Now we find Twilight busy keeping Flurry Heart entertained as they play with some stuffed bears and chase each other around pretending to be bears. Twilight got a little carried away when she accidentally scared Flurry Heart by pretending to be a bear, but she got to see how Flurry Heart protects herself by wrapping herself up in her wings and projecting a shield spell, which is kind of impressive for such a young pony. Then it was feeding time, followed by shopping time, a little trip to the Ponyville toy store to buy toys for the foals who were sick at the hospital. To make shopping time more interesting, Twilight decided to play race cars with Flurry Heart and run around the store at high speeds, pushing Flurry Heart in the shopping cart. But then we get to our first little problem of the evening. Twilight has to spend time at the checkout counter while Flurry Heart becomes restless and still wants to play. Unable to get Twilight to give in to her desires to keep playing all the time, Flurry Heart decides to operate the shopping cart with her magic and continue racing through the store. This leads to an accident, causing a bunch of stuffed animals to fall over and creating a huge mess that Twilight has to spend a little bit of her time fixing the mess. Next, a stop at Cheerily's store to borrow some library books. Books that Twilight no longer has in her collection because her collection's gone decisively scientific and mature subject, and her books would not be appropriate for young children anymore, as the subject matter would be way over their heads and far too technical. She needs something a little more light-hearted and fantasy-driven. I personally suggest my personal favorite, Alien Alicorns vs. Space Pirates, but Twilight's not that into the fiction half of science fiction, and instead prefers to pick up a book that she enjoyed when she was young that she can share with the other young ponies. It's actually a story about Groger, who is one of the characters that's a favorite of many ponies, griffins, and other such creatures that I have had some passing contact with. I know Twilight's choice of a story will probably catch a few ponies or griffins' interest, knowing what story she chose to read and who the story was about, partially. With the book subject being chosen, Flurry goes up to the chalkboard and begins to draw on it, inadvertently ruining Shirley's subject that she had written out for her class, perhaps for the next day, forcing Shirley to rewrite her entire lesson plan. After the little event at the school, Twilight, Spike, and Flurry Heart end up at Sugar Cube Corner. Leaving Flurry Heart to play with the Tate twins sounds like a good idea, and it's the kind of setup that I've always thought would have been interesting to have seen happen. Ever since Flurry Heart was born, I've always wanted her to interact with the Tate twins, and this was finally that opportunity. Unfortunately, we ended up with the Tate twins fighting over a toy, and Flurry Heart recognizing a friendship problem and wanting to solve it, because, you know, she's just that nice kind of pony and all. She tries to get help from Spike, who runs off to the toy chest to try and find a duplicate toy that the twins can play with, but becoming impatient, Flurry Heart tries to get Twilight to help her. Twilight is too distracted to pay Flurry Heart any attention, and Flurry Heart tries to solve the problem on her own, breaking the toy in half and giving one half to each of the two twins, which only results in the twins being mad at her and chasing her around Sugar Cube Corners and throwing cupcakes all over the place, creating a big mess. After this happened, Twilight took all of the stuff that she had bought over the course of the day and headed off to the hospital, making it there a little bit late, but not too bad considering all the time that was lost cleaning up Flurry Heart's various messes and dealing with other distractions. Twilight sat down and read a story to the Foals, but Flurry Heart lost her attention span and wanted Twilight's undivided attention instead of sitting quietly and listening to the story. Twilight tried to get Flurry Heart to wait things out and have her attention later. Flurry Heart wanted Twilight's attention right away and threw a temper tantrum. In that temper tantrum, she lost her favorite doll, the only thing that keeps her pacified when she gets fussy, and she began to panic, teleporting all over the hospital and levitating various fins off the ground as she continued searching literally every place for the lost doll. Unable to get it back, more and more fins got levitated off the ground until everything was out of control. Twilight was forced to use discipline, and it resulted in Flurry Heart crying, Twilight having to apologize for yelling at Flurry Heart, and Flurry Heart quickly forgiving Twilight. They hug, Twilight agrees to clean up the mess, and Twilight helped search for Flurry Heart's lost doll. Back at the museum, Cadance and Shining Armor were trying to enjoy art, but not always able to comprehend the complexities of what artists are trying to get across with their various works. And frankly, I'm not even sure myself when it comes to modern art exactly what any artist is trying to say. I'm more into scenery, as you may be able to tell. But anyhow, as the art reminded Shining Armor and Cadance of just how much they missed Flurry Heart, they became extremely emotional and had to return to the castle to be with Flurry Heart and Twilight and Spite. Twilight, Flurry Heart, and Spite were playing, and things had calmed down quite a bit. I see a few morals to this story. One being, if you are parents and you have a baby and you need a babysitter, don't wait until the last minute. Book your babysitter far in advance with plenty of notice, and don't just suddenly show up at a friend or relative's house expecting them to have the time right then and there to help you out. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your friends and family when you have to both babysit and run a whole bunch of other chores at the same time. It would have been very easy for Twilight to have focused completely on babysitting Flurry Heart and delegated the buying of the toys, the borrowing of the book, the buying of the cupcakes to either Spite, Starlight Glimmer, or one of her other friends. And then, after those chores were done, Twilight could have grabbed Flurry Heart and whoever assisted her in those chores, and they could have all gone together to the hospital to do the reading as Twilight had promised. The third lesson is a bit of a trickier one, and it's one that depends on a lot of different variables. When Flurry Heart was in the toy store and she wanted to continue racing carts, she should have known enough to be patient for a few more seconds, a few more minutes, and allowed herself to be patient and wait for Twilight to finish what she was doing, and in a very short amount of time they could have continued playing. Flurry Heart has to learn the lesson of be patient and wait, and you'll eventually get your way. Don't demand your way all the time. This other lesson that Twilight had to learn comes up when Twilight was in Sugar Cube Corner, and it happens again in the hospital. This lesson happened to Twilight twice, and this lesson that Twilight has to learn is pay attention to children. Sometimes children have problems that are important to them. Even if the problem isn't important to the adults, the problem is important to that child, and that child needs to be listened to and taken seriously, and the adult needs to help fix the child's problem before the child tries to solve the problem on their own. Ever since Flurry Heart was born, I've always wanted to see a story with Flurry Heart and Twilight spending time together and bonding. And I've also always wanted Flurry Heart to interact with the Cake Twins. I finally got that story and I'm very happy. Anyhow, that's about all I have to say for this one. Thank you for watching and good night.